There is one thing that as moms and business owners that causes so much mental fatigue that we just accept as the norm and part of the process, that we truly need to grasp and create a better system for, so that we can remove some of that mental load. And one of the hardest parts about being a mom who also has a business is the pure amount of decisions we have to make. And so anything that we need to do that is at a higher frequency, we need to have some sort of system for. And why I'm so big on structure, routines, habits, systems, processes, workflows is that it creates and sets an expectation for our brains so that we know how to respond, and it takes away the uncertainty, because uncertainty is something that causes us to spin. Uncertainty is something that causes anxiety, it spikes our stress. And so the more we can create certainty or have dedicated processes that we go through to do basically anything and everything, the easier it feels, right? So if you think about creating a habit or creating a routine for yourself, it makes it easier when you have a step-by-step process. It makes it easier to commit to working out when you know when you're going to work out, when you know, okay, first I brush my teeth, next I put my clothes on, then I put my shoes on, then I get in the car, then I go to the gym, right? And so while we may not consciously lay that out in that order, we often will create these step-by-step processes for basically everything that we do at somewhat of a high frequency. And that allows us to remove the uncertainty from it as much as possible. And it brings us a sense of peace, a sense of calm. And so what we're trying to create constantly as moms who are running businesses, who have to make all of these decisions all of the time, is we're trying to lessen decision fatigue. And so today we're talking about making decisions and how to make better decisions and why it's important to make better decisions. And so first and foremost, I think that it's important that we address that when we think about the way that we are living and the way that we feel, that is a product of the decisions and choices that we have made, right? So if you have ever been in a situation where you feel stuck or you feel sad or you feel defeated or hopeless or any range of emotions, there was a sequence of events that led up to that where you made choices or decisions that compounded to get that result. So a great example of this is my own story, right? So my turnaround point was that third arrest, that last time 14 years ago, where finally the weight of my choices and the continued compounding of the poor choices that I was making led me back to that place again. And so it is important that we always take our power of choice and decision making back. Because once we sit in the seat of defeat, once we tell ourselves or sit in the thought spiral of this is just the way that it is, then we have completely removed any sort of possibility for us to move out of that situation. And this is why, no matter what the situation is, whether it's in business, in life, in a relationship, this is why people stay stuck. Because there is this knowing of, I want to do something differently. I want to make a different choice, but I feel like that I can't, or I feel like that I'm too far in. And so business, this looks like you have built something that is successful, you have built something that works externally, whether that is continued revenue, continued clients, you're doing great work, you're getting referrals. And so you're like, okay, well, if we're checking the boxes of business success, I'm doing those things, but it doesn't feel good. And so we have the power to make different choices that get different results, or make the result that we end with feel different. So in your business, it is so important for you to have a step-by-step method, a system, a process for decision making, because the results that you want are not just from one decision. Usually they're from the compounding of many small choices and decisions, like every result that we have in our life. And being able to decide and confidently decide will dictate how far we go. Because if we sit in that seat of hopelessness or defeat or being stuck, that is such a waste of our time, our energy, our potential, and our intelligence, truly. And so we don't want to sit there. And so how do we obviously prevent ourselves from getting there as much as possible? And then when we are there, how do we get out of it? And so this is why we're talking today about decision making, and why I'm prefacing this, you knowing the importance of the decisions that you make. Because a lot of times we think that in the moment when we make a certain decision, we're like, well, this isn't that big of a deal, or this will only take 5 minutes, or yes, I can add that additional thing. I'll just move this around. And we don't think. We don't take the time to step back because we're living in so much reactivity. And this is why in making decisions, part of the process that I want you to develop is going to lead you to be more of a responsive leader and decision maker. And so what does this look like, right? How do we become somebody that is responsive instead of reactive? How do we make better decisions to get better results? And the answer is simply using the space between the stimulus and the response. And this is the space that is often squished, that we don't pay attention to, because that is what reactivity is. Something happens and we immediately react to it. Somebody says something to us, we immediately say something back. And so there is a space between that we are not utilizing. And we need a process for what to do in the space between so we actually utilize that. So I want you to think about any decision that you've made recently, right? Something that you decided for yourself, for your business, for your relationships, some decision that you made or said yes to, something you added to your calendar, whatever it is. And I want you to think about what prompted that decision. What came to you that you were like, I need to make this decision. And I want to give you an example of what reactivity looks like that's very specific, so you can be conscious and aware of this, because before we can change anything, we obviously need to be aware of it. So if we want to make better decisions, we need to learn how to become responsive. And to become responsive, we need to utilize the space between the stimulus and the response. So my example is this. A client came to me and her stimulus was she noticed a drop in her monthly revenue. And so when she came to me and said, I noticed this drop, and then, gave me a bunch of different things, a bunch of ideas that she had to basically get in an influx of cash. And so most people would say, okay, great. Let's do that. Let's map that out. Let's plan that. My response was different, because I wanted her to step back and I wanted her to respond to this versus being reactive. So what happened is she saw this, she immediately identified, okay, this month was lower. That created fear. And so her reaction was, how can I make more money right now? And a lot of business owners do this because, as we know, month to month, business fluctuates in revenue. You will never, maybe 99% of businesses, there's probably a 1% of businesses that have scaled and grown on a linear path. I couldn't name one of them, but I'm sure that some are out there. But otherwise, if you look at scaling in a business, it's not like this. It is up and down and up and down and up and down, and an overall net gain. So again, it all comes back to fear. And so we react. We react quickly. We see that we've identified a problem. We feel a threat. Then we go to fight or flight and we're like, okay, I need to fight. So how can I solve this problem right now? So again, going back to my response in the situation, I could have said, yes, let's do these things that have worked, because she's previously done things where it's been more of like a one-off offering, that she has a very large audience and very engaged audience. And so she can typically make anywhere from like $5,000 to $10,000, give or take, by putting out one single offer. And so that seems to be, okay, I recognize income dropped, reaction needs to be, I need to drop in and do this fast influx of cash. And while that still can be something that we do and that we will discuss, what I encouraged her to do was actually to step back out of that reactivity, because I wanted her to identify exactly what she was feeling, and not just what she was feeling, but what did that feeling start to dictate in her mind in the way that she was thinking? Because you can look at this and you can say, oh, my income dropped this month, so I need to go sign 1 million clients. I need to do this, I need to do that, and go instantly into that reactivity mode. Or we can say, okay, income dropped. That's making me feel afraid. That's making me feel like, what if I'm failing? That's making me feel like, what if this isn't working? Right? And so it's important for us, again, this is all in the space between the stimulus and the response, to step back into that observational view, to where we observe and become aware of what our thoughts are when something happens. And this is the part that we skip. And so when we're making decisions, if we go stimulus, react, stimulus, react, stimulus, react, this is why we have decision-making fatigue, because we're constantly reacting to everything that's being thrown at us throughout the day, which in business and life and motherhood, there's a lot of it, right? But if instead stimulus comes in, we recognize, okay, this is a thing, it makes me feel this way. These are the thoughts that I'm having about that. And because I'm having these thoughts, it's making me want to do this. But am I doing that out of fear? Is there data to support those thoughts that I have? Or do I have data to support the opposite? What sort of thoughts can I challenge this with? And is the way that I want to respond to this, or what would be the way that I respond to this that is actually in line with the highest vision or goal or the values that I hold? But we're not stopping to think about that. And that is the problem. And this is where having a system, a process in place for when we make decisions, whether those decisions are small or large, matters. So if every time something gets thrown at you, you know, first and foremost, you are not going to answer anything immediately unless it's an actual emergency, right? Like if your kid falls down and breaks their arm, like please be reactive to that situation and take them to the hospital. But that's not what we're talking about here, because so often we're creating self-imposed urgency in our businesses that's not actually urgent. And that's on us, right? So when something gets pushed to you, asked of you, that stimulus is there, your first step in this process needs to be to step back, step out, step away. And sometimes this even needs to be physical. I have had clients who, a Slack message will come through, they start spiraling, And I'm like, that is your cue. Get up from your desk and walk away. Leave the room, because you're not going to productively respond in the best way possible when you're in that position. So your first step before you make any sort of decision is always going to be to step back, step out, or step away. We need to remove ourselves mentally and or physically from the situation. If you're face to face with somebody and they, ask you something, hey, do you want to come to this thing? You feel like this immense guilt and people pleasing to be like, yes, I'll be there, of course. When really you probably want to say no, but you didn't even check in with yourself because you didn't utilize that space between, right? So this is all about making better decisions by utilizing that space between. We utilize that space between. First step is stepping away, stepping out of whatever the stimulus is, wherever it came from, asking for a break, right? If your team member sends you a Slack message that makes you burst into flames, if you answer while you're on fire, you're likely not going to say things in a way that is reflective of who you truly are or who you want to be. We've all experienced this in personal relationships where, text message or face-to-face conversation where we get defensive, right? Because we feel attacked. And that is us going into this fight or flight mode, which most successful, externally, very busy, overwhelmed mom business owners live there, because we're just trying to survive. So when a stimulus comes in, whatever the stimulus is, the question, the problem, I want you to step away. I want you to step away from it. Sometimes that's 2 minutes, sometimes that's 5 minutes, sometimes that's a whole day. And it's okay for you to communicate that. Because what I want you to think about in your leadership is also, it's very important for us as mothers, but also as business owners who have teams, to be the example. And people, our children and our teams, will replicate and fall into line with the culture that we create. So if we are moving from a place of fear and constantly being reactive, everything around us will mimic that. And so there is a level of responsibility that we have as leaders to where we need to be okay with communicating, hey, I saw this message, I'll respond tomorrow. Hey, I appreciate you inviting me to that. Let me think about it and get back to you. Let me look at my calendar. Let me have a conversation. We need to normalize putting space between when we respond, right? Even down to like our email. I have so many of my clients that I'm like, hey, it's okay for you to institute like a 48-hour or 72-hour response time for emails. Like the 1 hour turnaround on emails, if that's something that's draining you, like you're just having to live at this chronic heightened state of like, oh, I need to answer as quick as possible. What I want you to realize is like, that's on you. You can change that. So going back to our decision-making process, your first step is stepping away. Your next step within that stepping away is to identify the feelings that you have around the thing that just happened and identify the thoughts that you're having around the thing that just happened, right? So, okay, my income dropped. Okay, my team member just said this. Okay, my kid just did this. That makes me feel afraid. That makes me feel attacked. That makes me feel inadequate. That makes me feel angry, right? Identifying that and listening to and paying attention to the thoughts that you have around that. Because I feel afraid, that makes me want to do this. Because I feel unsure, that makes me want to make up for it and do this. Because I feel inadequate, that makes me want to prove myself by doing this. And once you are aware of those thoughts, then your next step is to challenge those thoughts that you have. Because if you're working with somebody like me, What we're changing is your operating system. We're changing not just the way that you're organizing your business and the team structure and the support that you have and what you offer and how you offer it. We're changing the way that you lead all of those things. We're ensuring that not just your business is organized and running well, but that your business is supportive of the peace and the calm that you want to have. So recognizing, right, if you're working with somebody like me or even listening here, you have that desire for like, how can I create this wealth or how can I continue my success, but also, not drown myself in the meantime. And so you have to remember the higher goal, and the higher goal will require you being somebody different, because previously how you operated was in this heightened state of fight or flight, reacting to everything around you. In order to create peace and calm in your business, you have to be responsive. And in order to be responsive, you need to take time to recognize, hey, old version of me would react this way. New version of me actually realizes that when my income drops, that is a part of business. And what I can do is go back to the bigger vision and the bigger goals and see that we're on a trajectory for actually the best year ever with what we've put in place, but I have to delay my gratification that I'm wanting by wanting to react and feel like I have a quick solve for this problem. And that's where we get stuck, is when we react. We feel like, okay, I've solved it, even if that's temporary. But quick fixes then create more decisions that we have to make in the future, and or compound into those decisions that lead us to a result that we don't want. And this is why decision making is so important, and alleviating decision making and the weight that that carries for us. I want you to implement this process into your life on a small scale for any decision that comes in, right? Your partner's like, what do you want for dinner? Immediately you're like, I don't know. Okay, wait, somebody just asked you a question. So let me step back for a couple seconds, right? What's the first thing that I'm annoyed that he's can't just make this decision. I don't feel like making another decision. Okay, so we've identified that. And so knowing that, how do we want our relationship to be? We want our relationship to be strong. We need good communication. Okay, so what would my response be that is in line with that? My response would be, I would love for you to pick the place that we eat for dinner because I don't want to make that decision. And that is a much different response than I don't know. So I want you to start practicing this, and it's important to practice this on a smaller scale and on a bigger scale. So anytime there is some sort of stimulus, it's great to practice obviously with kids because they're crazy. And if you have little kids like me, they're throwing tantrums. And I want to tell you that you're not always going to get this right. And sometimes you're going to make reactive decisions that you don't feel proud of. And I want to give you permission to still be a human in this process. But I also want you to make sure that you prioritize utilizing this space in between the stimulus and the response so that you can become responsive, so that you can actually solve problems instead of creating more problems for yourself. So just to kind of quickly go through this for you, when something comes in, your first step is going to be step away, step out. Your next step is going to be identifying the feelings and the thoughts around whatever just happened. Your third step is going to be identifying and remembering the bigger goal, your values, your vision, basically taking it big picture and remembering who you want to be. And then your fourth step after that would be, how do I respond to this in alignment with step number 3? Right? How do I respond to this in a way that is embodied of this person that I'm trying to be, this person that I'm trying to become, or the person that I'm turning into? So that's going to be your process. That will help you in making better decisions, and that will help alleviate some of the mental load. So you're making better decisions, you're getting better results, and you now have a clear-cut process that you can go through that is absolutely worth the few minutes that it takes for you to step away and go through it. If you have any questions about this process, I'm always happy to listen, to help. And if you are looking for somebody to help guide you through making better decisions for your business and getting to a place where you have peace and calm and freedom and flexibility as you are continuing to scale, don't hesitate to apply to work with me or see if you can get into our Mom Founders Inner Circle. So thank you again for listening. Please share this episode on your social media channels. I appreciate it. And I will see you guys next week.